We saw the free fall from South Carolina, Chad. 3 consecutive 11-win seasons. Connor Shaw, quarterback, all that talent on the front seven on defense in particular, led by Jadeveon Clowney. Then the drop to 7-6, and then the free fall last year. But then Will Muschamp steps in and really rallied the recruiting situation there after they were buried in the 70s and 80s with about 6 weeks left to National Signing Day, and he really rallied and brought in a nice recruiting class. So things may be looking up in Columbia.
Yeah, and this is going to be key because this defense, and that being Muschamp's specialty, we know that. David knows that more than anybody. He had to endure those hellacious years there with Florida. But that being said, South Carolina, number 14 in total defenses last year, finishing in the SEC, I believe they gave up a little over 2,600 yards rushing. I believe it was about 2,500 plus yards in passing. That's just not going to cut it if you want to be competitive in the SEC. Granted, losing the old ball coach, the head ball coach there, that really does make a difference, not having your leader there. But what I found interesting about this entire hire was that Will Muschamp had stated that I learned my lesson and I'm going to do things a little differently. Yet he goes out and hires Kurt Roper as his offensive coordinator again. And he hired on a lot of the similar staff that he had at Florida. So to me, I kind of find that a little comical. But that being said, I think there is some talent there for Kurt to work with. Pharaoh Cooper did jet. He left early for the NFL. I will say this: watching him in the combine, he wasn't stellar by any means. I think he could have definitely used another year of playing. He is a guy that's pretty versatile. You will miss him, but he was more of a vertical threat, once he got open and was able to run straight forward. Not much of a guy that was east-west to make you miss type of guy. But you do, I think they lost Brandon Wiles as well, thinking about that. But you got Perry Orth coming back. You got Lorenzo Nunez, who's going to be definitely a versatile player. He's able to use his legs a lot. Whether Kurt Roper can take advantage of him, we'll see. And, of course, then you got the true freshman Brandon McElwain coming in, who was another highly touted recruit. But like you said, Mark, they made a blaze on the recruiting trail, which is awesome in hindsight. And in perception is reality for a lot of people, so they think this is going to be a big deal. But we go back and we look. Muschamp had success at Florida his first year. I'm looking at this team this year, and there's a lot of work to do. There's been a lot of confusion on the defense, going from 3-4 to 4-3, having co-defensive coordinators with Ward and things of that nature. I'm curious how this personnel is going to shape up and how they can endure the SEC season as it goes along.
All right, March 15th is day one for Will Muschamp on the field with this football team, David. You saw South Carolina, of course, up close a number of times. Your thoughts about the Gamecocks moving forward?
Defense. It was the reason Auburn brought in Muschamp last year, and it took probably half of the season, a little more than half of the season, for Muschamp to finally put his stamp in on that Auburn defense. And toward the end of the year, you could really see that was making a big difference. He's got the similar task here facing him at South Carolina. And Chad mentioned the stats, but 110th nationally against the run, 99th in sacks, finished last in the SEC in allowing 27.5 points per game. So, when we brought up the recruiting and how they just finished like crazy, Muschamp with 8 recruits playing defensive end or defensive tackle. He saw the problem. He knew the problem. He's the right guy to fix that defense. How quickly can it happen? The Kurt Roper hire, yeah, I know it better than anybody. It was downright ugly at times. And then, we saw what Jeff Driscoll did this past year at Louisiana Tech, and Kurt Roper had that same Jeff Driscoll. It didn't happen at Florida, but there were, a multitude of issues at Florida with Jeff Driscoll and Kurt Roper, and it never saw. So, he has some toys to work with as far as dual threat quarterbacks go. Brandon McElwain, incoming freshman, maybe he gets thrown in the mix. Roper likes that kind of style, but the defensive coordinator hire as well, Travaris Robinson, he coached DBs here at Florida. But that's going to be Muschamp's defense. So it'd be interesting to. I think Robinson was more of a big defensive coordinator hire in terms of recruiting. He's the monster recruiter. This is going to be Muschamp's defense, and I think the biggest question, as we saw from how bad that defense was last year, is how quick he can put his stamp on this defense.
So South Carolina, with a bit of a strange schedule in 2016, they finish off with two non-conference games, Western Carolina and Clemson, the traditional season finale. They start off with two SEC games and a very winnable game to start us out on a Thursday night at Vandy. So, Mike, I'll let you do the take on that matchup, South Carolina, and your thoughts on Vandy as the Commodores have already hit spring practice on February 22nd.
Well, Mark, I'll start with South Carolina. I think the issues at South Carolina, I think the season at South Carolina is going to be far more than X's and O's. I don't know that we've ever went from one head coach to a completely different head coach like we have at South Carolina. We're going from Steve Spurrier, kind of laid back, offensive minded, to Will Muschamp, who is extremely intense and defensive minded. So I think South Carolina is going to be the issue with South Carolina is going to be more than X's and O's. It's going to be the culture of the program. When you look at these teams, these programs who have consistency over generations and decades, even when they change coaches, it's kind of similar. I think South Carolina, with a Muschamp hire, really looked at retooling their entire program. I'm not sure that was wise. So I'm really interested to see how South Carolina's program, and specifically the football team, changes its culture from a Spurrier era to a Muschamp era. I'm really interested to see that. I don't think it's going to work out well for South Carolina, my personal opinion, but they could surprise people and see.